Hello, everyone. I'm John Coleman from Apocatastasis, an Institute for the Humanities, an alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. Today, we're being joined by Chance Garton from the InnerVerse podcast. How are you doing, Chance? Welcome.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's good to collaborate once again. We've done some really mind-opening conversations in the past over on my channel, and happy to share some of my side of what I am able to educate about.
Absolutely. And Chance and I are going to be getting into biofield tuning and this whole idea of healing in very deep ways. Before we catch up with Chance and see what he's been up to, beyond our immediate topic here, just one announcement concerning Apocatastasis, and that is an invitation to check out our open event series. We have each month an open seminar, usually on a Friday, and this is indeed open. This is open to people who are not enrolled in the school and those who are, and it covers all sorts of topics. We've looked in the past year at Solzhenitsyn. We've looked at Plato's Republic. We've looked at Victorian literature, and we have all sorts of goodies coming up. This is especially valuable for those of you who are considering enrolling in the school, either for a standalone semester-long course or for our 3-year undergraduate study. Insofar as it gives you a good flavor as to how the different staff present their materials and the way we interact in class. So check that out, the Open Event Series, and you can find out about that on our website. There's a whole page in one of the drop-downs that is located at the schedule. So with that being seen, too, indeed, welcome, Chance, and tell us what you've been up to in the past few weeks since we last spoke on education and maybe education reform. What have you been up to on your channel and in real life, as they say?
Oh, you know how it is. It's springtime, so just getting all my ducks in a row around the house and the garden to whatever degree I can. And then in terms of my channel, there's always a lot of new stuff happening, 2 or 3 pieces of content a week typically. But a few of the highlights, just this evening, as of the day that we're recording this, I'm releasing an episode with Mark Gober, who is an amazing author. I think he's made it onto even New York Times bestseller lists, which is remarkable considering the subject matter he covers. But we talked about his new book, An End to Upside Down Medicine, which is the newest in a long series where he's taken a swing at various paradigms of thought and bringing the hard problem of consciousness to it and turning it all upside right again. So it's a super cool conversation. Really excited about that whirlwind of information, yet it flowed like, a gentle river. And beyond that, another pretty interesting piece of work is my, I don't know what number of show it is. I've got a lot of shows, but there's a premium show that I do with my buddy Dylan Secosio called Inner World, and that's available on my Patreon, or if people subscribe to my YouTube membership channel. And in the newest episode of that, just for subscribers only, we got into a very interesting discussion about how fake is antiquity. And the example that we use to bring that question up is various manuscripts that are attributed to ancient Roman or Greek authors, particularly that become the foundation of what the academic mainstream believes they know about the history of Rome. It turns out that there's a lot of them that are provably forged and others that are very suspect for being, discovered allegedly in the same way as the ones that are obvious forgeries. So that's huge. It covers the Renaissance era humanists of Italy and how the fad for archaeological oddities or manuscripts from antiquity became such a commercial interest and like a street cred piece of items. So they we covered all that off pretty nicely, and it opens the door to a very different view of history, at least a much more unknown and a lot of potential whenever things are unknown. So I'm excited about those couple of shows, but other than that, there's always something new happening on my channel, and the variety is pretty vast.
That's great. And I want to encourage the audience to check out Chance's sites and to also patronize him and to help his work grow. A lot of people are good at talking and thumbsing up, but it's time for us to put our money where our mouth is. And so please help Chance out with various things that he offers there. Take him up on that. And Chance's sites will be down below in the description as well. And that reminds me, I was watching, speaking of our old mischief that we've gotten into on our conversations, Chance, I was watching something on the mud flood yesterday and subterranean tunnels and so forth. And I was thinking of yourself there. And you bring up chronology. And in the past, I've spoken to Stephen Sorensen. And he was doing this really heavy for a couple of years, a C truth, the letter C dash truth. And I think he's focusing more on his own academic studies these days. But he was getting into that topic of provenance and these documents and who owned them. And he used to call up museums and ask them, like, do you know where this document that you have and that you're highlighting came from? And he found almost nobody, none of these museum curators knew where any of this stuff really came from. They could tell you maybe the last museum they bought it from and some rich dude that had it, but they couldn't really go back with this stuff. And they're basing, like you say, they're basing the whole field of history on these things. And no, it's like the blind leading the blind. Nobody even knows where this stuff comes from.
Yeah, it's really something whenever you start to investigate where these things came out of. And you got the Medici Pope in the 15th century with a standing bounty on ancient Roman or Greek manuscripts, rewarding the provider with 500 gold coins, which is a fortune, just an absurd fortune. Mm-hmm. And it's no surprise that one of the papal secretaries himself was this dude named Poggio Bracciolini, ended up being the source of about 15 or 20 different ancient Roman authors. They show up. These manuscripts were never heard of in the Middle Ages. And then they're handed over to the Pope, and then they make some copies of it and those circulate, but the original manuscript conveniently gets lost somewhere in there too. So that's just like a little taste of the absurdity, honestly.
Yes, and as we turn our attention now to our main focus, which is this biohealing, biodynamics, and biotuning, I should say, we see the same hanky-panky happening in other areas of human science beyond history. And one of those is medicine, or what calls itself medicine. And you see the same, or at least I see the same sort of mischief you see in the history field with mainstream medicine too, is modalities, let's call them, of healing that can be easily accessed, maybe freely accessed, or tamped down, and everything is funneled through, in this country, the Rockefeller licensing system. And my first question for this, actually, I'll put them back to back because they're related. The first is, if you can define for us biofield tuning and whatever other terms you might want to use interchangeably with that, Chance. And then the second is how you yourself got into this science and this pursuit.
Yeah, those are great questions. So biofield tuning is the syntropic process of bringing lost life force back into our bodies. And to really understand what I mean by that, you have to first comprehend what's the foundation of it all, the biofield anatomy hypothesis. And so this is something that is not completely just out there in the woo. The human biofield is a diffuse electromagnetic medium, or a bioplasma, that surrounds and interpenetrates the body. The thing about it that is not measured by mainstream science that has proven the existence of this electromagnetic field is that this biofield contains the record of our life experiences. So what we perceive as mind and memory, or experience as mind and memory, is a result of the dynamic flow of this electromagnetic field. And that might sound a little far out, but consider that neuroscience, despite their best efforts, and they've tried,
Mm.
They've yet to find the filing cabinet of cells in your gray matter that contains the hard drive data of what happened on a certain day at a certain time. It's not there. Memory is not in the brain. There's tons of research that demonstrates this, even to the point of teaching rats how to go through a maze so that they become proficient at it, and then systematically destroying parts of their brain until there's very little to no brain left, and they can still get through the maze. So what's up with that?
Wowzers.
I don't condone that type of research, but it's out there.
Yes.
And I think that that's disgusting, but it does show that there's something else going on with memory. And what's amazing is when you flip this paradigm, you realize that your mind is not in your body. Your body is in your mind. So we're all the way back to the old Hermetic principle of mentalism and proving it to be demonstrably true. And so whenever I say that biofield tuning is this entropic process of bringing lost life force back into our bodies, I mean that this dynamic bioplasma that interpenetrates our body in the field around us, it can have, you might consider like vortices or frozen areas that represent limitations that we've constructed out of belief systems or out of repression of certain types of feeling or consciousness. And that those fragments that are frozen or stuck are no longer circulating and flowing with the rest of your bioplasma. And that represents a limitation on the total amount of your life energy that you can access. And that life energy is more than just the vitality that gives you the juice to do something in a day. It's also your sense of who I am, why I'm here, your self-knowledge, your, and memory. I mean, memory problems actually are one of the things that biofield tuning is great for assisting with. People that have brain fog and all that. But beyond those issues, there's all physical maladies can be addressed with this process. That, some people might suggest that there is a connection between mind and body when it comes to injury or disease. But I just go all the way and I say all injury and disease is psychosomatic, which means it's caused or aggravated by internal conflict. So cognitive dissonance in our thinking or in what we allow in our mind equals stagnant biofield energy equals bodily dysfunction, pain, or distortion. It's just like that. And it's a way simpler way of understanding things. We don't have to get under the hood and figure out the molecular biology of this, that, and the other part of our body. I'm not saying that those type of researches have no value, but, they tend to, the systematic physicalism and trying to reduce everything down to parts tends to overcomplicate life, because no matter how small the slice of the pie that you examine, it's a fractal. So it contains the entire holographic complexity of the whole, which means you're never going to fully understand something by trying to break it into smaller and smaller parts. You're going to be stuck with the same problem you had not understanding the full thing, which was that the full thing is a wholeness. It's all one thing. Everything is everything. So there's a lot to this, but it's also kind of simple. Unexpressed emotional energy buildup, self-limiting beliefs that you mistake as your personality, negative expectations about life, any and all forms of victim consciousness. These are the causes of stuck energy in your field that are causing that by their nature, dysfunction or problems with your body or your just personal energy levels. So that's kind of, it's not explaining the method of how one can actually restore this lost life force to someone's circulation, but that's the foundational premise that it's all based on. And how I got into it, I've told the story a fair number of times, but I wound up with a long-term injury that I had attributed to something external. Thought it was from rock climbing. I heard about biofield tuning from my guru and friend, Eileen Day McCusick, who literally wrote the book on it and discovered the anatomy. You can find her book, Tuning the Human Biofield. It's really good read. It's a mind opener. Or Electric Body, Electric Health. It's her newer book. And I decided to try out one of her forks on the area of my body that was injured, my left shoulder. And long story short, not only did it work really quickly, but the life situations that I had going on externally that were the representation of my inner conflict and my self-limitation, those situations also resolved as I fixed it on the energetic level with my body. It's not that it was automatic or easy. I had to go through it, but I was willing to go through it. And I did, and I came out the other side a much more clear, happy, coherent person. And so I decided I needed to know more about this. I experimented with people that I knew, practiced on them. I didn't go through any kind of training or certification because, one, I didn't have the money to pay for something like that at the time. And two, I wanted to discover it for myself, to prove to myself that it was really there, rather than waiting for permission or to be told how to do it. And so I did. I innovated my own way of doing it. I think it's not that far off from how Eileen does it, but there's maybe a few eccentricities about my process that set me apart, which I'm excited about. I think that they're good differences. And yeah, that's kind of my best shot at concisely answering those questions.
Great. Well, thank you for those responses there, Chance. And I think even in the mainstream medicine, they're occasionally forced to admit at least dribbles and drabs of what you're bumping up against. I think, especially when it comes to something like limb loss, it's very well reported that people can still feel and they'll get out of bed and things, and they won't physically be a leg there, but they'll be expecting such a thing.
Yeah, one of the things that I read before I got into biofield tuning, but it was like a step on the path to accepting that it was worth investigating, was a book by an acupuncturist who, among many other remarkable stories of her work with clients, she reported being able to use the acupuncture process on the area where a limb would be for somebody that had phantom limb syndrome, and just poking the air at the approximate acupuncture points, and the phantom limb syndrome would resolve. So I was like, okay, so there's something going on with that.
Wow, that's quite wild. And I think a part of this consciousness has probably entered into mainstream psychology as well. You mentioned kind of these repressed things, and I think there's some accounting of at least dribs and drabs of what you're really diving into. And it's interesting you speak of this unity of the biological, the physical, and the spiritual, and the energetic, as you say. And what's striking me is that this is a very pre-modern and we'll say, yes, pre-modern, ancient or medieval way of understanding reality, as opposed to modernity, which has broken everything up into these, the clock, everything's an hour, or the periodic table of elements, everything is broken up artificially into these pure elements that don't generally exist in reality, or just the dissection of life, which has accented the last 300 years, if we take the regular chronology.
And the shift of scientific naturalism to scientific, scientism. What I mean by that is most of the things that pass for science, whether it's virology or astrophysics, are predicated on observations of simulated models or Frankensteinian concoctions. And what I mean is the old understanding of science required an observation as the first step of a phenomenon in nature. Whereas much of modern science is beginning with observations of things that did not exist in nature. Maybe they were assumed to, but never proven to have existed in nature, or with the astrophysics side, just outright computer models and simulations that were programmed with assumed calculations and formula of forces and gravity and dark matter and a lot of stuff that is figments of the imagination. Whether or not they describe reality, who knows? But it's a symptom of people's living in a model of reality rather than living in reality, or being filtering all their perception of reality through models. This is what Baudrillard refers to as hyper reality, where the media makes the unreal seem real, and your expectation is that what you've been programmed to believe through media is what's real. You filter everything you perceive in nature through those expectations. And then whenever you see natural phenomenon that do not align with those filters and expectations, it seems unreal. And then it's an easy jump, hop and a skip over to, we're all in a simulation. It's all fake.
Yeah, and you can see that same phenomena. You can see that also in these national and international health groups, where they're projecting these diseases which may or may not exist, or they're making them in some back lab or whatever. And this hypothetical, that's the reality. That's the reality. Ironically enough, this hypothetical threat out there. And so that gets now we're back to circling back into maybe something that came up with our education discussion of the manipulation of anxiety, of fear for social ends. And you can start seeing the same thing, just like earlier I had pointed out the similarities between the field of history and some hanky-panky and medicine. And you can start seeing the same thing that you're bringing up about the projections and computer models and things that don't actually exist and they could exist. And you see that now with the preventing viruses and bird flus and monkey poxes and whatever. But it's all theoretical, and it's like you say with Baudrillard, the fictional or the potential becomes the reality that you operate against. It's really something.
And I just had that conversation with Mark Gober, and it was nice because I've been aware of all of the disputations of germ theory and virology, but I had never given myself a chance to go through all of the points in the research of those who refute the paradigm in a step-by-step systemic process like Mark takes you through in his book, An Into Upside Down Health. And I knew that they'd never isolated or purified the C19 cooties. But what I didn't realize is that no virus of any type has ever been isolated or purified or proven to exist in nature, nor have they ever been able to prove a virus causes illness. It's all assumed, which is crazy. I mean, he goes through all these freedom of information requests that were made to various health institutions around the world of every country.
Yes.
And not a single one could cough up a document that showed a record that this type of scientific proof had ever been, generated. So it's crazy. It's it's a house of cards. Most of people's worldview, which I think it seems discouraging at first, but it's sort of not so bad when you realize it's not about needing to know how everything works or the absolute truth of everything. It's more important that we just remove the lies because life is so expansive and it's infinite potential, which means it's actually totally fine to operate in the place of not knowing. What does us harm is assuming things are true that are not true. So I'm a big fan of the apophatic method of gnosis, which is you know a thing by knowing what it's not. And that's all we got. Ultimately that's all we got. And there's nothing wrong with that. The truth about illness is that, and the truth about warfare, full spectrum dominance, they call it.
Yes.
The real full spectrum dominance is worldview warfare. The Germans have a word for it, and I can't remember. It's like Weltanskrieg or something. I'm probably butchering that. It's one of those amazingly long, super multi-syllabic German words, but we don't have a word for it. We just have to say worldview warfare.
Yes.
But worldview warfare is basically at the root of all of the revelation of the method that's passed out to truther podcasts and the conspiracy theorists, the unfortunate truth. And I'm friends with a lot of people that create this kind of content, so I'm not hating, but the unfortunate truth is eventually it all just still boils down to they're doing it to me. I'm a victim to these forces that I have no control over. And that's why I like to talk about biofield anatomy and getting yourself in tune and in coherence, because you actually have an innate immunity to all of the dissonance of the world when your inner wholeness is in flow. And I mean that quite literally. Despite all of scientism's best efforts to convince us of the slow heat death of entropy in the ever expanding void that are of our universe that we're taught about. The fact is that there's a much more powerful force than entropy, and it's the syntropic force. It's the ordering principle of the cosmos that is the reason why there's a something instead of nothing, which is obviously much more powerful than the entropic force, because look around you, you exist. So I like the example of, everyone's had the experience of a bright person walks into a room and everybody's mood shifts, right?
Yes.
And even if a party pooper walks into a room, if the brightness of that room is strong enough, the party pooper doesn't really have an effect. If everybody in the room is not in such a good mind state, then the party pooper could come in and really change the vibe, right? But the thing to keep in mind is that with mind, and all of this is mind, that whenever there are two minds present in an environment, the more coherent mind entrains the dissonant mind. And that applies to everything physical too. All of this physical stuff is made of the same vibrating mental energy, or God's imagination, as everything else. So that's why you put a bunch of metronomes in a room together and set them off at different times, and you come back later and they will be in sync with each other. Things just work that way. And that's why tuning forks and coherent sound has a healing effect on the body. And I'm talking about something much more surgical and repeatable and even mechanistic in a sense than just getting in a yoga studio and taking a bath with some sound bowls. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That feels great. There's a positive effect to that as well. But what I like to teach is the much vaster potential of targeting certain ailments and knocking them out in an hour session, where afterwards, wow, my skin cleared up, and I've had skin problems for my entire life, or I had digestive issues for the last 15 years. And after one or two sessions, now all of that has changed. Or I hear things like, the way that I process information is completely different. The way I hold myself in my own mind has shifted completely. I have, I came home from work, and instead of feeling like I was out of gas, I knocked out a couple of projects around the house that I've been, putting off for ages. There's something to that extra 5, 10, 15% of energy that when you're already such a battery of infinite source consciousness energy, you increase your threshold by a bit, your capacitance, and the cascading effects can be really immeasurable. But it comes down to worldview healing and self-view healing, which are actually kind of one and the same. And the way that they're one and the same is that you have to reverse the belief that life is happening to you and realize you are happening to life. And if you can always hold that perspective, eventually, no matter how sneaky it is, you will find all the vestiges of victimhood that you're holding on to, and you'll get the choice, the free will decision to let that go and reclaim your free will.
Wow. Thank you for that, Chance. And I want to ask you about a term you brought up early on, as we move towards the discussion of, some of these diseases and where they're coming from. The term is going to be cognitive dissonance in our society, and how that leads to unhealthy mind body response. But I gotta put you on the hot seat here. Did you tell me that viruses haven't been isolated? They showed me a spiky ball thing for like 3 years, and I stayed in my house because of the spiky ball computer graphic. Are you telling me this isn't as sure as I saw on the television?
That's what I'm telling you.
But it was spiky. Like, it was scary, and it was red, Chance.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
But you're telling me that wasn't necessarily...
dot. Hope you got your cooties shot.
Oh, I got 10 of them. Yeah, I got some for you too. I'm gonna mail them to you after this. Just having some fun there. But yeah, tell us about this cognitive dissonance. I think some of this played a role in our education talk lately. I mean, this is in many regards a society of cognitive dissonance. I'll just give you one, and I kick it to you. The houses here. Nobody is in their house anymore. They're all working for these houses that they don't live in, and you go to their house, nobody's there. And that's one example of a million. I want to hear your ideas about the cognitive dissonance in society and how that creates some of this dis-ease that we have.
This is not something I learned in the the biofield tuning literature per se that I can remember, or maybe it was there. It's been a while since I reread it. That maybe it was there and I just wasn't ready to comprehend it. But in my experience working with people, I've found that cognitive dissonance is the chief cause, if not the only cause, of pain and distortion in the body. And I know that sounds intense to blame it all on one thing, but I can give some examples of that. What we're talking about when we say cognitive dissonance isn't exactly just the rhetoric you may have been exposed to regarding believing something and then seeing its opposite in the world and not being able to, or seeing evidence that, you know, goes against your belief and not being able to process or accept that evidence. That is cognitive dissonance. But internally, cognitive dissonance is where you're holding two beliefs that are directly at odds with each other, yet you believe both of them completely. And that's where I find the most problems in people. Like whenever we're trying to deal with a specific issue that is recurring or chronic, I'm finding more and more that I'm getting better at looking for it and in my pattern recognition, as I've noticed that this is prevalent in the, you know, because sometimes we do tunings and it's just like, let's restore some of your capacitance so you have more energy to do stuff. But maybe you don't have, maybe you're a little sore somewhere or a little stiff somewhere, but you're not like, you know, messed up. What a good example though, I've given this one out a few times, but you know how it is. Like the most recent clients are the ones that are most accessible in memory. And I worked with somebody who had what I call the Job complex. Although there's lots of versions of that. It's where you're in your youth, you're a little one, and you hear the story of Job, raised in a highly religious household. You know, Job was God's best servant, did everything right, and was totally crushing at life, had a family, had wealth, and all that. And then the devil's like, well, the only reason Job is such a good servant to you is because you give him everything good. And God's like, no problem. Let me just smite the shit out of him. And so, pardon my language, but you know, a little kid hears this, and a recent client of mine, and internalizes it as a deeply held but unconscious belief, not necessarily in the front of the mind all the time, that I can't be too good and I can't feel too good. Otherwise, I'm inviting the wrath, essentially, like Job. So there's like right there, that belief constitutes a limitation on one's potential. So if I go too big, it's going to get taken away. And a lot of people have a version of this that's not necessarily related to the story of Job. Like, you know, as soon as they're doing well in life, they're looking for the shoe to drop. That's something that a lot of you out there might be aware that you hold that type of belief pattern, and then you experience things that support that belief pattern. I'm saying that our beliefs and expectations return to us in the form of repeating patterns in our outer world experience. And you would be surprised at the level of consistency in some of your patterns that are just too close to you for you to notice. It's like your nose. You can always see your nose, but it's invisible by its proximity. That's how these patterns of experience tend to operate for us, especially because some of the ways they repeat are more thematic than necessarily identical people and places. But regardless, that's a thing. And so this guy had this Job belief, and it was in a certain part of the biofield that pertains to how well one can experience pleasure in their body or fulfillment. And then in the same region, which was the lower back, essentially, the sacral level issue, he'd had lower back pain for years. I think he said something like 10 years when he was 10 or 12 years, and he's not that old of a guy. He also had recurring ankle injuries in life with the right ankle. The right ankle, one of the generalizations of what it might hold on to, it has to do with perfectionism. And so we also found a time in his timeline where he made the decision that he needed to be perfect, you know, or he wasn't good enough. I'm only good enough if I'm perfect, that type of belief. And you see how those two things conflict. I can't be too good, plus I have to be perfect. Those two things were coexisting in his psyche. And the areas of the biofield where I found those beliefs were areas that had chronic pain or injury repetition.
Mm.
So a couple weeks after the session, he texted me and said, I was waiting to make sure that it was legit and not just a fluke, but I haven't had any pain since our session. And I'm like, thumbs up. That's how it's supposed to go. That's how it's supposed to work. And so a little more about the biofield anatomy. I'm talking about finding beliefs in certain areas. That is the, I'm calling it an anatomy because there is a consistency from human to human that the left, right, forward, back, up, down axis of the spherical energy field or toroidal energy field that our bodies are within, that there is a consistency to what type of information, belief, experience, emotion can be stuck at various coordinate regions of that torus. So that is that's fascinating in and of itself, but it gets even more interesting when you think of the analogy of the rings of a tree. That when you look at a tree stump, the rings tell you, you can see things that happen to a tree at a certain age of the tree. That each ring is like a year of the tree's life, right? We've all probably heard that in elementary school. One of the few things that stuck with me from my government mandated education that was of interest as an adult, right? But our biofields work the same way, believe it or not. It's not exactly the same way because you have, your field, it stays at roughly the same approximate bubble space size, like dimensionally, about 6 feet off the body in each direction, less above and below, but around you about 6 feet. And where something is at in that space from 6 feet away towards your body, the proximity towards your body determines how long ago that information record occurred. So for a 30-year-old, if I found something that was 3 feet off their body, it would tell me that the experience was around the age of 15.
Wow.
And so this is part of like the magic of biofield tuning is that sometimes I will start a session and as soon as I hit a fork, I'll have a strong impression of something that happened in their life or a thematic pattern. And then I will look for where it exists on, the time chronological meter of the distance from the body. But like sometimes I'll get the impression before I even am like sweeping through and looking for a spot, which is really interesting. This is another one of those recent examples, but it's not always this dramatic of a sort of like psychic knowing every session. So don't get your hopes up for the party trick to be as profound as this, but the session will be profound however it goes, right? But like this recent client, as soon as I hit the fork, I got through all my methods of knowing. I found that she had a separation from her boyfriend or a boyfriend at the time that was a very important relationship to her, that he had moved away. Okay. And I knew that it happened when she was 22. And that, long story short, there was more to it, but long story short, that was exactly true. And why it was important was because it represented the overall pattern of experience that we were working with relating to her adaptive conditioning around being abandoned or people leaving that she was invested in energetically. So that's one example. Another time, a little longer ago, similar thing. I found as soon as I was hitting a fork that there was like this nervous system overload that was a result of a car accident, that the kinetic and energy of that impact was still, held in her nervous system. It hadn't been expressed as energy can transfer from different forms, right? Heat, electricity, kinetic energy, potential energy, etc. So as soon as I hit the forks with this person, I knew how old they were when it happened and that they'd been in a car wreck at a certain age and that there was a big head trauma in that car wreck. And yeah, it was boom, boom. All of the above were exactly true. So how is it that a guy waving around tuning forks in his living room on a Zoom call with somebody in another state or another country who sometimes they didn't even give me any information about themselves up front, that I can pick out specific experiences that were monumental to informative to their worldview and their self view, and even the exact age that it happened. You know, like I've got the recordings. I've got the recordings of these sessions. I could like play it for you, and you would and show that literally happened. So I'm not trying to say that I'm like special. I think other people could learn to do this. In fact, I know other people who do this. So it's not like that this is some sort of wizardry, although it kind of is, but why I like to share this information is because I want to flip people their perspective of life, who they are, how their body and health work around, and what they can do about it. That anyone, I think, can learn the biofield anatomy pretty easily. I mean, in my opinion, I became proficient in this within 2 years of practicing. And that was without training. So there's training out there. You can go to the biofieldtuningstore.com, which is Eileen's website. She's got training, or you can just, pick up a fork and start practicing yourself, or just go there and see what's going on that website. I love that website. It's where I get all of my tools from at this point. So I'm going to kick it back to you because I just said a lot.
You sure did. And you have a lot to think about. Now you took it on and developed this idea, but early on, as you were laying out this concept, Chance, I want to know, is this idea of, this connectivity that you're ultimately indicating, and you, as I say, you developed it out to this biofield and these rings around us, I guess you could say. But I'm trying to think, especially for people who are new to this, is there, I believe it's called kinesiology, where on the bottom of the feet, each part is supposed to match some other part of the rest of the body. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, that's a great link to what we're talking about, how everything's connected. And in the biofield, the feet are a little bit mysterious in the sense that they're similar to the hands in the sense that they're like a fractal microcosm of the whole rest of the body. And that's why what you're talking about with kinesiology or reflexology of the foot is so profound. And I'm going to give people a tip that if they were to go get a weighted tuning fork like this one, a weighted tuning fork has weights on the end. So it's not an audible vibration. It's audible if you hold it right up to your ear.
Yeah.
Maybe you can hear that a little bit. Yeah, kind of quiet, but you use a weighted tuning fork by applying the bottom end of it once it's vibrating to somewhere on the body directly. Okay. And if you look up a reflexology chart of the foot and say you're having problems with your liver or problems with your chest is constricted or your heart rate is a little too high, you find the spot that corresponds to that organ on the bottom of your foot, and you apply the vibration of the weighted tuning fork directly to that spot on the foot. Just do that for a couple minutes at a time, maybe a few times a day. And I dare say you will find improvements with the issue that you're having with that particular organ. I've tested this as somebody that has maybe like a personal biological configuration that lends itself towards constriction in the solar plexus region when stressed.
Yes.
That's kind of a thing for me specifically, that I've been able to test exactly what I just talked about and feel my chest open up and my lungs expand to deeper breathing just through, in times of stress, just through a weighted tuning fork on the bottom of my foot. So that's just one of the many uses. If there was a place to start with all of this that's really accessible, it would be to get the sonic slider, is what this fork is called, off of the Biofield Tuning store and start using it on your body intuitively, however feels right. But, at least have it on hand for if you got a migraine. It can help you reduce the intensity of a migraine or stop it before it gets bad. Or you've got, sinus congestion. Rather than having to do something kind of painful, like hard massage on the lymph positions of the face and the cheeks, try some gentle vibration and see if it doesn't have the same effect without the bruising of your cheekbones. I've done all of that and it works. So this is a really good place to start. This exact tool is what I got over the 6+ month shoulder injury that I had. That was so bad I couldn't raise my hand above my shoulder or my arm above my shoulder for a long time. And nothing was helping until I got this.
Wow.
Turned out I had to change my life in some ways for that to, to keep the healing, but it was worth it.
Yeah, that reminds me for the audience of a conversation I had in another conversation, one about earthing, which is simply just walking barefoot as much as possible, with Clint Ober. And that's his whole bailiwick is advocating for earthing. And we see this connectivity, this theme, which keeps coming up in our talk, Chance. This connectivity, and of course, Clint was bringing up the fact that we wear all of these plastic and rubber-soled shoes, and how that has contributed to such inflammation and disease and so forth. When the medicine is right there, and it's actually something we don't have to do anything special. We just have to walk on the ground itself for this relief, for especially arthritis and things of inflammation like that. I'm sure it has a connection to cancer as well. And then I kick it to you to see if I'm making any sense with this. And then I think of discussions I've had with Emily Trinkus, who does a lot of astrology work. And again, the same idea that you have these larger rhythms that we fit into. And it's getting back finally to our initial comments that this connectivity that so many people are rediscovering after the past 300 years of isolating everything since the Enlightenment.
Grounding is huge. And this entire modality that we're talking about with the biofield is predicated on the understanding that your biology is an electrical system that is connected deeply to the entire world as an electrical system. So essentially your body and your biofield are like a big vessel or container of life force. And a lot of our problems do come to like voltage issues, right? Or imbalances. Things are, you have a buildup of a imbalanced charge. So grounding, earthing is huge. I mean, something that I make an effort to do every day, even when there's snow on the ground. My feet have gotten pretty tough. I go on so many barefoot walks with the dogs. But there's other ways to raise your voltage that are relevant. And they're kind of simple. I mean, get rest, get enough rest. I'm not always somebody that pulls that one off, but it's because life is so fun and exciting. Deep breathing, eating whole foods that are pure and fresh, that still have, especially like right out of the garden. The difference between a piece of broccoli, raw piece of broccoli, right, cut straight from the garden, or a strawberry versus from the store, it's a night and day difference. I think spring water is a good choice for your electrical capacitance. And a lot of people know about, showing love and gratitude and appreciation. But another part of this is that you got to consciously receive those things. So yeah, I'm definitely not afraid of asking for praise, at least with the people that I like, family members and my wife and close people. Like, I did a great job, right? Yeah, you did so good. And then I can feel good about that. And, there's nothing wrong with consciously receiving love, gratitude, and appreciation. That's such a big one that most people, for the sake of their holding up their belief in this messiah, self-sacrificing, the best person is the one that gives it all away for free, etc. Let's got to do my mask makes your mask work, or all of that. Like,
wowzers, yeah.
The best person, our model hero, is the one that let the crowd kill him. Right? There's so much of that, but that's not working. We need to have a good exchange of not just showing the gratitude, love, and appreciation, but receiving it. So I want to make a point about that. Like, get out of your phobia of asking for those things. It doesn't cheapen it to ask for it. And, just keep that in mind. because your loved ones actually want to give you those things too. And it can, it just accelerates the whole circuitry of positive energy amongst you and people that you care about. If you're showing them love, but also receiving the love, and maybe you already are getting a lot, so you don't have to ask for it, but there's nothing wrong with asking for it. And definitely don't send it back when you get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always that temptation.
There's always that, like, oh, no, not me. I'm not good. I'm the bad one. Like, so many people hold that in their mind. Yeah. But you want to hang out with, generally just want to hang out with people that are what Eileen McCusick calls electron donors rather than stealers.
I like it. Yes, I like that.
Simply put, it's not just about the people you hang out with, but pay attention to the meter of, is what I'm doing making me feel like I have more energy after I'm done or less?
Mm-hmm.
Or, maybe like working out is a tricky one, because you might think, oh, that makes you feel like you have less energy. But not really. You might be worn out from the exertion, but your overall energy levels are going to go up from working out. The same should apply to whatever it is that you're doing that you're not feeling your battery drained. So whether it's the people that you surround yourself with or the activities that you're doing, pay attention to the gauge of, like, does this feel like a drain or a gain? And focus on making your life more about the gains or only about the gains. My philosophy, it might sound radical, but like my philosophy is, if it isn't a full body 100% hell yes, it's a hell no for me. I live that way, and I think you could too if you thought about it and you allowed yourself. A lot of people think you got to do the hell no stuff just to get by, but I say you don't. But allowing your emotions to flow rather than be suppressed, simple one. The power of coherent sound, another one that's simple but very profound, and a lot of implications for that. Of course, being in nature, finding as many ways to laugh as you can, following the natural inclinations and impulses that your body has. So that might be like, you think you're sitting down to do a certain type of work, or like, I got to read this book, and you get 5 minutes in and your body's like, I need to reboot. I need a nap. Just follow that inclination. It might only be a 5-minute nodding off, but the difference in how you'll feel after that little reset that you follow the natural inclination versus how you would feel if you like forced yourself to stay awake, or like chug some coffee or try to make yourself do the thing. Just keep that in mind. The natural inclinations that you've got and impulses, they are there for a reason. If you follow them, you're going to have more rather than
yes.
And of course, sunlight is another electrical thing. I mean, it's the source of electricity in our realm, all of that. And chemically scented products are also something that are a detriment. And that ties into a bigger picture question of like, what is dissonance in our life, and how does it affect us? And by the way, the list of things I just went over, that's all from the end of Eileen McCusick's book, Electric Body, Electric Health. So I consider that to be a great list, a check boxes. But on the dissonance level, how I perceive it working is that everything in our environment that's dissonant requires a certain amount of filtration for us to cope with it. Like, this is a hilarious and kind of graphic example, but my wife and I were at a concert a few nights ago, and the gentleman next to her, he had a strong odor of cigarettes and urine, unfortunately. And so
it happens to the best of us here.
So that's extremely taxing to cope with, that scent being like right up in your business. And eventually people can all relate to have been in an environment like that. Eventually it kind of, you stop noticing it, right?
As someone who's worked in bars for a long time, yes, you do.
Yeah, you stop noticing it. Or like there's cow towns where you drive through the town and it just smells like manure. But the people that live there, they don't have a nose for it. So that's what I mean by filtration. Now, this applies to more than just smell. It's the sound of your air conditioning unit kicking on. It's the buzz of the lights over your head in your office. It's the hum of the refrigerator. It's the clutter in your environment that hasn't been tidied up. There's a lot of things, but like whatever is dissonant or not coherent or not harmonious, we have to spend a certain amount of our consciousness energy or our life force energy, our biofield energy to filter it out. And the more things that we're filtering out, the more of a hit on our boundaries or our shields, if you will, that entails. And I think that when we're in a strong place of coherence within and wholeness within, our ability to filter stuff out, our resilience is very high, especially if we're continually engaging in the things that replenish our energetic battery, right? So I'm not saying that these things are, some kind of unavoidable curse or plague. It's just that be aware of managing how much am I filtering versus how much am I replenishing myself. And if you keep that balance in check, you can exist in the world of 5G towers and Wi-Fi signals. You can, you can handle some bad smell in an environment or whatever the case may be. But whenever there's too much of that stuff and we're depleted is when we start to take a real toll on our well-being and other issues that may have been latent in our mental structure can become exacerbated. We can become more vulnerable, susceptible to them. We see them as a bigger threat or a bigger likelihood, and we increase the recurrence of the external world expression of that type of pattern coming at us, happening to us. It all comes back down to like, am I happening to life or is life happening to me? And when we're really depleted, it's hard to feel like any other way other than it's being done to me. But it all is a choice.
Yes, I think of this cognitive dissonance that keeps coming up here. I happened last week to be at a public school for a history event for a couple days, and on the loggia, on the covered walkway outside from the bus line to the main part of the school there, the front door, they had columns. Very beautiful sentiments were painted on these columns. Hard work and determination and honesty and very nice things. And I was meditating, and I have been since, on, okay, you have the children who have to walk under these columns, and they see these beautiful things. And how do they turn into, as I was driving home out of the school, a huge line of cars for the pickup. I've never seen anything like it. Must have been at least 100 cars. How do you have a little child who is given by their adults these beautiful sentiments on the columns, and then how does that baby turn into the washed out middle-aged, just like white knuckling it through life parent in the drive in the parking lot at the pickup? And I think it is a lifetime of this dissonance that you've laid out, and you laid out the subtlety of it too, Chance. And that's I think what this biotuning can really bring, in addition to it nesting, as we've, I think, intimated, biotuning, nesting in other healthy practices, whether that's earthing or exercise or correcting our sleep patterns and so forth, that these are each almost like supporting each other in this healing.
Yeah, it absolutely is the case. And what I ultimately want to leave people with about biofield tuning is, I'd love to see people listening right now as a client, but I'd love even more if as many people that I see as clients also pick up a fork and start learning how to make a difference in their life with it, or for people they love. Like, even if it's just emergency triage. Like, I remember the first time my wife ever tried using a fork on somebody else, because I was getting a little ambitious with climbing a wall somewhere, like a rock wall, not like meant to be climbed though. I was just being a kid, and I scraped up my leg, and I had like an open bleeding spot on my leg, and she started to use the fork. She would pass it over the spot where this injury was, and she could hear the pitch change.
Wow.
And we haven't even talked about that, but in terms of how the forks play into this, it's a bigger story, but the traditional method is that you listen for the fork to do something different and how it changes in different regions away from the body or over the body indicates, information that opens you up to intuit something deeper. That's the short of it. But she could hear the pitch change as she moved it over my open wound. And that was her paradigm shift that there's definitely something going on here. Another story I really like that to inspire people to try this out for themselves is I had a client who had just recently picked up his first tuning fork himself. And he told me that he was at a skate park and he met somebody there at the skateboarding park who had just hurt their ankle. And he's talking to this person while they're sitting on the bench and says, I've got this tuning fork. I don't really know what I'm doing with it, but it's supposed to help with injuries. You mind if I try to use it on you? So I'm told that he gets the fork out and waves it over this guy's ankle for 10 or 15 minutes. And then they go their separate ways. But before they go their separate ways, the guy said, I think it feels better. Winds up running into this same gentleman a week or so later. And he's told that the injury had gone away. And not only that, but it had been an injury that had bothered him consistently for a very long time. So now I don't have any more information about like what else shifted for this guy. If the injury shifted, like what changed in his psychic world. Because I like to address things from the mental side and shifting people's thought patterns and letting that heal the body. But it can go the other way too. The difference is why I prefer my way is because if we heal the body and then the thought patterns change, but then later we go back to the old thought patterns, our body can return to the same negative expression too. So I like people to really know why it was like that and be super aware of it, because once you know something, you can never unknow it. But I still love that story because that's somebody that in their mind, they thought they had no experience or didn't really know what they're doing, but they made a difference for somebody, particularly in like an emergency triage, first aid situation. And at the very least, having a fork on hand for that is great. Pain reduction or bringing swelling down or, just calming somebody down whenever there's something's amiss, whenever they get hurt. So all of that, I want people to know they can do this for themselves. But I also love working with people. And difference between this and like your traditional, not traditional, but the current modern medical system is that I'm happy if we just do one session and you're all set. Or I don't see you again.
No lifetime customers.
Maybe I see you again in a year or two. Or, some people do continue the work. I probably have nearly half of my sessions are people who are coming back for another session.
Okay,
but that's because our inner world is so vast that there's always potential to go further, especially when you consider yourself as the fractal microcosm of the entire universe. Technically, there's no end to how much coherence that you can attain to. You can always keep going, and it's like affecting the entire world in a way, or at least your entire world. So there are people that come back for seconds, thirds, fourths, and I'm totally happy with that. But it's not the type of therapy where to even get somewhere, you got to go for years. Like when we're dealing with things on the pattern level, mental pattern level, or repeated experience level, in a session, we don't have to go through every instance of something hard that happened to you or all the traumas you ever had. We can figure it out on the story level. And it's like the difference between pulling a plant up by the roots or cutting off a few leaves. So we can get everything energetically clear or integrate everything that ever related to that psychic pattern without having to know every instance of it and verbalize it all. That being said, there is also a cool thing about tuning sessions with me that we do tend to hit the most significant beats of somebody's life story all in one time. And for some people, even just that is helpful because, they maybe have never told one person in one sitting X, Y, and Z at the same time.
Yes.
But anyway, I'm going on and on about it. There's just so much value to the system, and I hope more people learn it or at least experience it.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned the story, the life story, and that's kind of how you're approaching it. That plugs right back, of course, into the hero's journey and into archetypes. And you mentioned people maybe getting some healing and not realizing what caused the initial disruption, and then going back. And that's the whole temptation to go back to bad habits or back to destructive people or whatever, maybe symbolized by the sirens or whatnot in the Odyssey. Or similar tropes in other stories.
And the sirens they do their thing with sound.
Well said. Yes, excellent catch there. One final practical question, and then we'll lower the helicopter here a chance. When you're doing this with a physical person, it's easy enough to visualize. Okay, I'm putting the tuning fork over this giant gunshot wound they have, or over this paper cut or whatever, or over their regular self. How does this work when you're doing this at a distance with Zoom? I mean, are you just like pretending you have like a table there and just pretending there's a body there, or what's going on?
Great question. That's exactly what. Yeah, you got it right.
Oh,
so
okay.
I have a table. I have a table, but it's not just an empty table. I mean, I could do it that way if I wanted to. To be honest, I could do all of this with zero implements and just use my hand and my voice if I really wanted to. But I like the implements and the tools. I like the aesthetics that they bring. I think aesthetics.
Do they give you a cape too, huh?
Well, I think aesthetics are a big part of the philosophy of beauty is crucial to the maintenance of coherence. And that's a side subject maybe, but that's partly why I not only do I have a table set up in my space where I do my work, but I actually build a surrogate body out of crystals and candles that correspond in their color and in their symbolism and their scent to the different energy centers of the body. So it's like a big crystal dummy.
Yes.
And I work with that as if they were in the room and that was them. There's tons of advantages to doing it remotely that you don't get when you're in person. And that might seem counterintuitive, but in my experience, it's just the way to go. I like it better that way. And I think I'm more effective that way. And it's amazing because you don't even need to be able to hear the tuning forks for the system to work or the modality to be effective. What first opened me up to doing it remotely in the first place was I was at a music festival. So, and I had a booth and it was in a loud area near a stage playing music. And I was able to tune some people and I couldn't even hear the forks. So,
yes. Wow.
And that really sold me on like, okay, this can be done at a distance, no problem. And that ended up being true. Yeah. And then that's partly, around when I started to develop my awareness that my cues about how I'm finding stuck energy and what it means are more internal cues rather than external, like listening to the pitch. And that's something maybe a little more specific to me. I don't think totally unique to me, but that's part of the just, try it out and experiment and keep going approach, that you'll find that different individuals have different ways of accessing their intuitive knowing of stuff. But you got to figure out how your body's intelligence is primed and designed to speak to you. But you'll get there. You just keep trying.
Great. Thank you. And final question is, and then you'll let us know about your website and such. But while I have your ear here, Chance, maybe this is a subject for a whole other discussion, but do you see any application of this bio-tuning beyond spiritual healing or energetic healing, however you'd phrase that, beyond that to the physical? Do you see any application of this for physical ailments, whether those be chronic diseases or things like tumors or even migraines, or things that have a physical aspect where they assert themselves, or digestive problem? We can go down the list, but do you see a physical application of this bio-tuning?
Yes. Yeah. I've directly witnessed people overcome chronic, sometimes lifelong issues through biofield tuning.
Mm.
There are no promises or guarantees with this stuff because it's not me doing it to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's me and the client are collaboratively going about putting the pieces of the puzzle together with pattern recognition that I bring to the table so that they can make a new free will choice about how they see themselves and how they see life and what they're okay with and all that. But more often than not, we're able to at least make a difference, if not actually knock out the situation. And if in one session we make a difference, but we don't knock it out, maybe in the second or third session is when we've solved it completely. I've never worked with people that have tumors, so that I know of. So I can't speak to that, but on things like other types of chronic issues, for sure, there's been tons of examples of results and sometimes like really dramatic results.
Wow.
One of the first times I had a dramatic result was early in my practice. I saw a gentleman who had a leg length discrepancy of 6 or so inches, one leg longer than the other.
Yes.
And he'd been seeing a chiropractor about it. And he emailed me after the session 3 days later that he saw his chiropractor, and the chiropractor was like, "What did you do? Your legs are the same length."
Wow.
So
Yeah.
It resolved a physical, like there was a physical change to his body rapidly after the energetic shift. So that kind of thing happens all the time with tuning. Some people's session is more that they just feel lighter and they feel better and they feel like they have more juice to get things done or to cope with things. And other people are overcoming something chronic that they've been working, living with for a long time. So I think the potential is unlimited because in my humble opinion, all injury, disease, distortion in the body, etc., is psychosomatic. It's not sometimes, like medicine will tell you, modern medicine will tell you it's, sometimes there's a psychosomatic link. I'm telling you, there always is. And if we're not finding it, it's because we're missing a piece of the puzzle that would bring all of that pattern into more clear relief. I mean that in the dual sense.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Chance. And the audience can see your website there, InnerVersePodcast.com. That is also down below in the description. And you've given us a great insight into this biotuning, Chance. Is there anything else? What else should we keep an eye out on your website? Biotuning, we see you mentioned some great podcasts that you have and some premium content that you offer. What else can we look forward to on your site, or maybe things shortly coming down the pike?
I would say just whatever place you like to receive content, whether it's YouTube or the iTunes podcast app or other podcast players or Rumble or Odyssey or etc. Just subscribe and set up notifications so that you get notified. And give a browse through at least the last couple of years, 3 years of my content. I personally think that my podcasts, 99% of them hold up to the test of time, and that they're not, that might be part of why my channel doesn't grow as rapidly as others who are quick to jump on whatever the fad, like hot topic is. I don't do that, but I do make shows that are going to be enlightening to you whenever you access it, even coming back to it again sometime later. So there's just a ton of variety. But one thing besides my actual podcast videos and audio that it'd be of interest is I've also recorded a series of audiobooks for my friend Dylan Secosio. His books are called Spirit World, WHIRLED. If you buy one of those audiobooks or use an Audible free trial that gives you a credit to get a copy, I get, support through that. And you get some really fantastic foundational knowledge about occult symbolism, mythology, language, what ties all of the aspects of the priesthood system together. It looks like we dropped John. I bet he'll be back in a second, but it's on StreamYard. So I know that we're still recording because I use StreamYard myself. So hello, everybody. Welcome to Apocatastasis Institute. But But yeah, check out the Spirit World audiobooks. That's a really good call. And there's a variety of types of shows you can listen to on my channel, and I know that you'll enjoy them. And especially think that if you go to the InnerVersePodcast.com/sound-healing page to find other content I've done about this subject that we are on today, you will learn more. And, it might take a few rounds of listening to, or a few different videos of listening to really internalize some of these concepts, but I know that they can be life-changing for you. They were for me. I know I sound like a salesman, but I don't care if you come to me for work or if you work on yourself with this. I just want people to know the real mechanics of how their mind, body, spirit operates. And I don't know where John is, but I think he'll be back any minute. So I'm just going to hang out.
Can you hear me?
Hey, man. Looks like
Okay,
you
we
dropped out, but I feel like I wrapped it up nicely there.
Sure. Well, I can snip out all this stuff. How about you just you were talking about when we cut out, what were you talking about? You were talking about
I wrapped it up. So if you want to just, splice in the last things that you say, that should work. I brought up the audiobook series that I narrated and what's in them.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll do that in 3 and 2. Great, Chance. Well, thank you so much for that preview of coming attractions and present attractions online. I'm happy to see that you're still on YouTube yet. They haven't booted you out yet. So may you live long and prosper on the Archon's website and continue throwing thunderbolts of truth at them there.
I hope so.
And to the audience, thank you for your attention. And again, Chance, thank you so much. And so nice to see you again.
You too, John. Appreciate it.